Welcome people to the show. This is a live stream from 9th of September 2012. A very special date indeed. And this live stream is not just a normal live stream like I did in the past. This live stream is dedicated to all the people who have suffered, who still suffer, who are dead, who were killed in many events worldwide. Like some years ago, you remember the Twin Towers, and many people died. Then there was a war, and even if people think there's no war right now, but there's still a war happening, but a war which we don't see, but there are victims. So yeah, there's a lot to say here, and I had also in my past live streams some victims talking about what kind of war is this. And okay, today I have a special guest, and he knows about this war. Is Dirck Storm. And okay, you have the word. Welcome to the show.
Hi Hans, thank you very much. I really appreciate the privilege of appearing on your show this evening. As you just mentioned, I've been a victim of what might be called the global virtual concentration camp for, well, now in my case, some 22 years. And it certainly shows no sign of whatsoever of letting up in my case, just as in all the other targets whom I know of. What I'd like to do in the next hour is to lay out, to discuss aspects of this really inhumane system as a whole that I think are important for understanding and making sense of it. In early 1990, just 2 years after I earned my third university degree, which was a Master's of Applied Mathematics, and 1 year after marrying, I used my savings to put a down payment on a townhouse in a safe middle-class suburb in the eastern part of the United States. Before moving in, I had the level of the radioactive gas radon measured in the house, which showed that it exceeded the limit advised by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I then submitted a request to the Homeowners Association Committee to allow me to install equipment to lower the radon level. Despite the very real health risks of breathing radon-laden air, the committee members rejected my application, clearly because any external evidence that any house in the neighborhood had such a radon problem would lower the financial value of even their houses to some extent, and thus posed a financial threat to them. I wrote letters to both the state environmental health authorities, the EPA, and my congressmen and senators asking for their support, but they had no authority to overturn my neighborhood association. And so this went on for a year before I finally lost patience and told the committee that I was going to publicize through the local media their rejection of my request as a denial of just the protection of health. They then granted approval. Not coincidentally, my harassment began right after my initial request to put in a radon abatement system. But since it first seemed to be only isolated incidents, I realized that connection only much later, years later, as a matter of fact. However, since it soon escalated to the point of being severe after the committee finally approved the installation of equipment to attenuate the radon, it is now quite clear that I was most likely selected for these outrages simply by trying to exercise my rights as a homeowner and as an individual for the sake of my health, all simply because of the committee's greed. Even at that time, what happened was far out of proportion to anything experienced by my neighbors. So I'll just give some examples. For example, the outside of my cars was gouged, the front door of my house was progressively stripped of its paint. The rubber gaskets around the doors of both my house and my cars were knifed. Mud was smeared inside my locked and alarmed cars. Just to make sure I got the message, a branch from every single bush and tree that I ever planted was broken off during the night after I planted each one. Also, although I had no understanding of the true causes until years later, my ex-wife began to experience chronic fatigue as a result of very poor sleep from constant, vivid, and unpleasant dreams. And she also began to have various pains throughout her whole body, which none of the many doctors she went to could ever explain or even help with. She stopped working because of that fatigue and pain, which in turn made things financially difficult for us. After a couple of years of such stress, we separated, and I remember her telling me just after she moved hundreds of miles away that she suddenly felt much better and was walking 5 miles every day, like 8 kilometers every day. Clearly, she was not the intended target in our case, but at the time I knew nothing about even the concept of targeting, and so I was completely baffled as to why her health had suddenly improved. Then, after I was alone, types of harassment were added. Again, I'll just give examples. Upholstery in my locked cars was slashed. Trash of all kinds was thrown on my lawns. My newspaper was stolen before I could get to it in the morning. Mail from my locked mailbox was often opened or stolen. Porch light bulbs were struck very skillfully, just hard enough to dislodge the filament and thus fail to illuminate, but the glass was not broken. Wire securing the external telephone utility box was constantly cut so that my internet connection as well as phone calls were repeatedly dropped, despite assurances from the telephone company that there was no problem whatsoever with the line itself. Even the foundation of my house was hammered to the point that partial holes were made in the concrete. Additionally, my sleep began to be disrupted by anonymous people calling up in the middle of the night who said nothing, even in reply to my asking who called, and who also did not hang up the phone, unlike anyone accidentally calling a wrong number. This continued even after getting an unlisted phone number, and even having that repeatedly changed. So much for unlisted phone numbers. In addition, unknown persons would ring my doorbell in the middle of the night or set off my car alarm and run away before I could see who they were. Stones were projected hard against the windowless side of my house, not just to cause significant damage to the aluminum siding, but also to awaken me. After living there for 8 years and still selling the house at a loss, I moved to an apartment in a different state where the same problems continued and others were added. For instance, indelible stains were made to my white work shirts whenever I left my wash unattended in the building washing machines, yet no such stains occurred when I stayed with the washers for the whole time. One morning I found that the lock of my locked mailbox had been punched out and removed, which the management of the complex insisted had never happened before to any other resident. I then submitted a form requesting that the U.S. federal mail inspectors investigate this blatant interference with mail delivery, which in fact is a federal crime in the U.S., but I never heard back from them, just as I never did after submitting similar requests after countless later thefts of mail from locked mailboxes at subsequent places where I lived in the U.S. Around this time, the same 3 perpetrators, I had observed 3 very suspicious individuals in my old neighborhood, but I never quite caught them in the act, just talking about it, that's all. So at any rate, these same 3 perpetrators from the previous state, from my old neighborhood, suddenly appeared in the new complex that I was in, and they were openly derisive of me, and they in fact sporadically popped up later as well. So to me at the time it looked like a clear case of some sort of, well, psychopathic stalking, but there was no reason for that because I had done nothing wrong to this. Not only did the old forms of harassment continue just as before, but new ones again were added, all in contrast with my neighbors who by their own admission never had any such problems with the exception of a single neighborhood prank the year before. To give an example, just within a garage, my garage, which I now had, I didn't have a garage before, my car continued to be vandalized and sabotaged, despite my keeping it locked and alarmed inside the locked garage. Then, even after I bought the most secure garage door opener then available to consumers, and which changed its electronic code to one of billions after every use, it was inevitably hacked by my perpetrators within at most 2 days after resetting it. In fact, they regularly demonstrated their contempt for my security efforts by opening the garage door by the time I woke up in the morning. One day I returned from work to find the garage door continually opening and closing. When I contacted them, the manufacturer told me that no buyer had ever before reported that their product had been successfully hacked. Another form of harassment was introduced at this time that made it unambiguously clear that literally every step I took within my own house was monitored at all times. New house, my persecutors began making what sounded to my musician-trained ears like some sort of hammer striking a metallic resonator every time I placed my foot on the landing at the top of the stairs on the second floor. I emphasize that this was not any sort of creaking sound that you could expect to occur in any house. and its totally artificial nature was underlined by several observed facts, including that it only occurred when I went upstairs, never going downstairs, and that the quality and intensity of the metallic clinking sound never varied in the least, regardless of where on the landing I placed my foot and regardless of how gradually or suddenly I placed my weight on it. I mentioned some details like this because inevitably people will say, well, couldn't it be this or that or whatever? So, you know, I really tried to be very carefully observant about all sorts of things and properly analytical to rule out various causes. But as I said, in conjunction with all the other forms of harassment, which I won't needlessly repeat every time I mention the move, it was quite clear that this was part of the same process anyways. And at the same time, at this point, I began to experience demonstrations of covert entry into my house. I'd already had high security locks installed, as well as an alarm system that was remotely monitored around the clock, but the perpetrators further flaunted their apparent invincibility that very night after I had that alarm system installed, when they cut the electricity to the whole house, thus making it clear that no conventional locks or alarms would deter them. Sure enough, whenever I later would return from work, I would find that my electronic devices had been reset, including my clocks, showing that the electricity had been turned off when I was working, despite the fact that both my neighbors as well as the electrical company assured me that no one else had experienced any such power outage. In fact, all the power lines were located below ground in that neighborhood anyways. Then in the middle of one winter night, I was awakened to find myself nauseous and almost dizzy and reacting to some sort of powerful synthetic skunk-like smell pervading all 3 levels, including my garage. Immediately after that time, I began to experience tinnitus, or artificial tinnitus, for the first time in my life, which incidentally no family members ever had, specifically in the totally unnatural way of hearing precise, and I emphasize precise, electronic tones. This was not noise of some kind, such as people have with naturally occurring tinnitus, generated in my left ear, but only in brief and isolated bursts when I was playing the piano and at no other time. At the time, I didn't know what to think about this. I guess I was in a state of denial because it was so strange. But at any rate, lastly, by this time I started to notice a peculiar taste and smell of my milk. I'm a big milk drinker, which was exactly when I began to have digestive problems for the first time in my life. The thought of being poisoned must have been too strange and terrible for me to consciously admit, but it finally became too persistent to be denied, at least after a year or so. And in fact, several years later, I was telling one of my closest friends on my obviously well-monitored phone that my poisoned food and drink typically had a slightly detectable taste and sometimes even odor. The very next day, when I was poisoned again, there was no such taste at all. By the way, I also later demolished what I knew to be the false idea mentioned to me by skeptics that I was merely developing lactose intolerance, because I drank an entire liter of milk just after buying it with absolutely no adverse reaction whatsoever. It was only when it was in my refrigerator unattended by me. So at this point, I'd already applied for a job overseas as a final desperate measure to flee this harassment, persecution, whatever you want to call it. There's no real proper term for it almost. After getting approval for my new job, I moved to Germany, where in each of the 3 towns I lived in for 4 years, the previous types of harassment continued with refinements and others began, such as selective theft of small objects, family mementos, and important papers that had no monetary value for thieves and thus could not be easily reported to police, especially since the criminals left no obvious signs of forced entry. The fact that I continued to be harassed at all, even after moving across the Atlantic Ocean, made me doubt that my oppressors were operating in isolation from any larger group, but I still failed to find on the internet about what I was really facing. I guess I was just really not using the proper search terms. I don't know, it's just difficult for me to find out about it at that time. Nevertheless, I couldn't avoid realizing that somehow larger forces were at work. And I'll give you an example of this. Selective theft of my mail continued even though I now received it at mailboxes at the secure government facilities where I worked. Also, after the poisoning became ever more intense, I once experienced indisputably clear evidence that my food was poisoned by someone even in the highly classified building where I worked. Consequently, it was hard not to avoid wondering if covertly abusive elements within government were facilitating the persecution. Also, at this time, about this time, the advanced nature of the technology used started to become undeniable. The least sophisticated was the ability to bypass any openly available locks and alarms without leaving any signs of forced entry, which I should note in the side note that despite the capacity of at least sophisticated thieves to do that for many, many decades, maybe a century, is almost never acknowledged by law enforcement. Probably because they're too lazy to deal with it. Well, other reasons too. However, a clearer example of this high technology actually was the the induction of loud cracking sounds in furniture and other objects within my residence so frequently as to be obviously caused artificially. I'm not talking about the rather infrequent sounds of thermal expansion and contraction, that sort of thing. I'm talking about sounds that are induced, within seconds or minutes of each other, for no apparent environmental reason whatsoever. And the fact that such noises were induced in whatever room I entered, no matter how silently I walked or even crawled to conceal my movements from any outside observer, meant that something like through-the-wall radar technology had to be used to monitor my movements. Furthermore, the video cameras, as I recall, they were X10 video cameras I bought and connected to my computer to monitor my apartment when I was gone in order to try to catch the image of the criminals as they entered my apartment to steal and to poison, worked flawlessly when I was home and awake. But their video, the video of those cameras was typically jammed whenever it was taking video when I was asleep or when I was absent. And that happened repeatedly, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. So it's absolutely impossible that such non-working, when I just happened to be gone, was occurring as opposed to when I was there. Just the odds of that would be so astronomically suggesting that advanced technology was being used occurred sporadically when I occasionally awoke during the night to hear strange electronic sounds that seemed to originate in the wall right next to me or even closer. Only just after I moved back to the U.S. did I become truly aware of what had been happening to me for 14 years. I was lying awake in my hotel room before being able to move to my apartment when I heard at a low volume two words recorded from a close relative of mine that seemed to originate in the left side of my cranium. Instantly I realized that extremely advanced tech had to be used, and when I finally had my computer unpacked and connected to the internet, I discovered that I was not alone, that this network of persecution was global, that it had existed in some fashion for many decades, and that it employed the entire gamut of injurious techniques and even advanced technology to target one's property, one's body, and one's brain through such technology as voice-to-skull transmissions. Different non-electronic forms of harassment were added at this time as well. Again, the old ones continued. So it was becoming, well, it had already been a hell on earth. It was just becoming an even worse infernal place for me. Such as the regular theft of gasoline from my car overnight, as well as carefully engineered attempts to drive me off the road. Another incident occurred after I'd been regularly feeding a very friendly stray cat, which would come running even when I called to him. One day, about 2 hours after going upstairs to my apartment without seeing him, I came down the stairs to find his corpse, with rigor mortis already setting in and his head bashed in and wrapped in a bloody towel. Then, shortly before trying to sell my car, I found that the title to the car had been stolen from my safe deposit box, which was inside the high-security underground vault of my bank. I think that vault is even bomb-proof to some extent. Even though I always kept both user keys with me at all times, and despite the bank personnel telling me that no one else had ever accessed the box. And then I also began experiencing the full panoply of electronic assaults, including sleep interruption and deprivation, pains in all parts of the body, sudden instantaneous diarrhea, nausea, headaches, dizziness, again with no conventionally diagnosable cause for anything. I should mention that until I started being targeted in this fashion, I was always very healthy. My family's very healthy. I don't engage in any unhealthy habits. You know, I don't. So at any rate, I just mentioned those things as an aside. These electronic assaults even occurred in the highly classified facility where I worked. The worst of these was when the nerves in my feet were subjected to continuous and extreme pain for 9 hours each day at work for 3 weeks. I'm sorry. Since I had no way of shielding my feet when I worked it was a sedentary job. I was programming databases and that sort of thing. I permanently lost much sensation in them. One night I awoke with a dazed stupor in my locked and alarmed apartment to find it filled with the same synthetic skunk-like smell that had been sprayed in my townhouse 4.5 years before. And immediately after that night, I experienced the same semi-covert electronic test tones when playing the piano, but for the first time now in my right ear. 2 events around this time showed how difficult it was to elude the electronic assaults. The first occurred when, by a series of extremely evasive actions in driving and so forth, I was once able to elude the perpetrators when driving cross country, because that night at a hotel I had no pain, and I also had deep, uninterrupted, and thus perfectly restful sleep, just as I did before the targeting. 8 or 9 hours completely restful sleep. No awakening. I didn't even have any dreams or anything like that, which I typically didn't have before I was targeted anyways. The second time occurred when visiting Chile, when I hired a taxi to drive me to the base of a deserted and entirely treeless mountain in the Andes. In fact, there weren't even any big shrubs of any kind. I hiked up that mountain and I felt no nausea, no headache or other pain, which is what I was having at the time, especially intensely, despite the high altitude at which many other people naturally experience some of those very symptoms. Finally, after several years of such ongoing torture and exhaustion from years of sleep deprivation, I was forced to stop working long before I intended to. I then moved to Belgium for reasons independent of my targeting, but where, of course, I continue to be stalked and electronically assaulted. I now have continuous artificial tinnitus, especially when I'm trying to play the piano, as well as tremor that prevents me from doing various things like playing the violin or even writing very much at all, or even legibly. Sometimes I can write a little bit, or often, but it's terrible handwriting because I shake so much. Also, my sleep is now more impaired than ever. I usually get about 3 to 5 hours of extremely light sleep with minutely scripted dreaming that always leaves me exhausted and usually nauseous. It's the accumulation of years of that has slowed down my recall, my thinking in general, renders concentration and remembering new information extremely difficult. The direct assault on my nerves, especially those on my feet, head, and legs, has fully resumed to the point where I have hardly any reflexes in my knees, no reflexes in my ankles whatsoever, almost no feeling left on or in my toes, and many other sensory and motor nerves have been permanently injured or even destroyed, thus making it even harder to keep my balance, as well as making it increasingly painful to walk. I should mention that that damage has been repeatedly documented in neurological tests, such as nerve conductance tests. So it's not something I'm just imagining or whatever. Since I now have no car and don't speak the local language with ease, the stalking has incorporated such nonverbal techniques as frequent vehicular intimidation and endangerment when I'm walking in public, especially away from very many other people. And then also the suddenly high frequency of people whom I pass with crutches, canes, and wheelchairs, especially just after very painful and crippling electronic attacks in my feet and legs. So that's a summary of what I've undergone for 22 years. I'm sorry if it was too long, but I guess I had to give some details there.
I also want to say what's happened to me. I mean, I was not suffering, or I'm not suffering things like you, but in fact that I am taking all these things, you know, and I put all this life. I also got attacked. I'm working also like an actor, you know, or extra in commercials and soap operas to gain some money, because I don't get paid for that what I'm doing, so I need also to work, you know, like everybody. Sure. And when I get a job like this, I have to go out very early and come also home very late. So I mean, I'm on the street, I go to the studios, I go to the places where they make the to the sets, we say
Sure.
set, you know. So okay, before that that happened here in my head, one day before there were two guys coming to my place. I was not at home, I was also working, and when I came home from work at night, and then my neighbor told me, Hans, they were looking two guys for you. They said they were friends. And I asked him, did they left a name, a message or something like this? And they say, no, they didn't let anything there in paper, or they didn't say what name, what's their name, but they were asking for Johann Anton. And so I thought, all my friends, they nobody of them, or no one of them, they call me Johann Anton. I'm Hans, you know. This is my name for many years. Johann Anton is something formal when I have to sign it, because I was born Johann Anton Oellers, but Hans is like the nickname for Johann, you know. So I thought there were friends looking for me, asking for Johann Anton. So it's definitely not a friend, you know. Then I asked, tell me more, what happened, you know. They say, yeah, they came with a motorcycle. I don't have friends with motorcycle, doesn't make sense. Then I asked, okay, and the message, did they left a message? And they said to stop to publish stupid comments on my Facebook, and that's someone who doesn't like what I'm doing, you know. And I thought, okay, crazy people, maybe someone of my neighbor saw that, or someone gave my name, or I don't know. And I continued the next day to go to work, but on the way to work, so I didn't pay attention until I felt a hit on my head, and boom, I almost fainted out, you know. But I stood up, and then I saw the motorcycle with two guys, and not that bad, it was like a how you say, a tube, a metal tube, something like that.
A metal pipe or something.
Exactly. And but they left, you know. They didn't stop, or they didn't rob me, because normally when you get a hit, or I mean, at least they steal your wallet, or they
exactly. It was clear it wasn't thieves. Yeah.
Exactly. Until that moment, I didn't know anything. I said, fucking crazy people, you know. But then with the time, because I went still to work, I will continue here with my little slide. All these pictures I have on Facebook. So if someone has Facebook, he can watch these pictures. This is a close-up. Looks horrible. And then I went still to work, because I didn't feel it in that moment. I mean, maybe it was the shock, or I not even noticed that I was bleeding. And then they put me down. Then I started to work. Let's see that. Yeah, it's loading here. Okay, behind are my friends, the other extras, and yeah, they put me this, and I could continue. I used to have a beard in that time, you know, and yeah, they gave me this, but I not even took the pill, because I don't like to put any chemicals stuff inside my body, you know. No, sorry, this is another picture. This is a normal assault in Mexico City that happened, when was it? Let me see, 2004, 31 of May 2004. This was a normal assault, and they really stole my cell phone and hit me and everything, you know. I mean, this is something different. So, okay, let's take away this for the pictures. Okay, so I continued to work, and then the people, you know, in the work they say, what happened? Did you fall down? I say, when I fall down, I have a wound on my nose. No, I got hit. You don't see that. And they're making fun, and then you know, they say, yeah, you have to use a helmet or something like this. And tried also to forget this, but with the time I was thinking why it could happen. So I came to the conclusion that is maybe it was like a warning, because there are too many things like it matches, you know, connecting the dots. It was like this, like a warning, you know.
Exactly.
But I don't care. I don't care. Come here again. Hit me again. I will continue until I'm dead. Anyway, I talked later with my neighbor. They asked me, we will take care of you because they love me. They say, I'm the only güero, the only blonde guy here. And they know that I'm alone, and they say, yeah, watch out, or tell me the next time. And I told them, okay, if you see the motorcycle guys, hold them and call me, and then I can punch them by myself and stuff like this, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, I still feel secure here, and after that happened, that some months ago, and nothing else happened. And maybe they know if they do something, because I have more than 5,000 friends on Facebook. You know me, many other people know me, and so when I disappear, or when something happened to me, then there will be a big investigation, and they will lose, you know, because then the things are coming up. So
exactly.
You know, what I want to tell you, all the people who are watching me, I'm smoking like an idiot, you know, but I not even pay for the cigarettes, because one of my friends, he give it to me for free. I say that because many people, maybe they think, okay, you say you don't have too much money and so, but you're smoking, you should have a lot of money. No, they are for free. And anyway, they're like 10 pesos here. It's less than $1, but they give it for me for free, and I feel fine. I'm 47 years old. I have a lot of energy. I not even need to sleep a lot. So when I disappear tomorrow or next week, then I was getting killed. Okay, so because I'm not even thinking killing myself, or having heart attacks or problems with my health, or even if I smoke, I'm okay. So when I am dead, then really that is something
know that
happened to me.
Yeah,
you know?
people have done something horrible. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that is my part. What I wanted to tell about this, because I'm not a mind control victim, or I don't hear voices, or I don't smell chemtrails. I'm just a normal person, and but I'm helping to make the live streams, that the people come together, that they get informed, that they know what is happening, because I know that all this what I'm doing here is not like a show. Many people, they say a radio show or show. For me, this is something really serious. It's part of my life, because I could do other things in this time, you know. I could go out to watch a movie, or some beers, you know, but not. I trust them because they are also friends with the time. I knew them on Facebook or on blogs, and then when I started to think, okay, it sounds fantastic, you know. The first time when I heard, for example, the chemtrail or H.A.A.R.P, I saw that, oh, it's like a science fiction movie, and I started to follow, just to be curious, you know, to see what they are offering, what they are telling, and then I really saw that it's really happening, you know. This is not just science fiction. This is really something important that the people have to know, because we are all affected in certain way of that, you know. The chemtrails was Russ Tanner, and he can smell chemtrails. I mean, many people they think it's not possible because they're so high, and how he can smell it. But many people, they have certain senses, and they feel, you know. For example, I'm smoking. There hundreds of people, they not even care, but thousands of people, they maybe they say, quit it, I cannot stand the smoke, you know. And nobody is the same. Some other people hear better, other people see better, other people have better memory. So I'm thinking,
I wish it were science fiction. Unfortunately, I had no choice in the matter, and that's the way it is with all the other targets too. So yes, Hans, it's really quite horrendous.
Yeah,
I had some thoughts about the nature of this, as well as other aspects of it, the techniques, technology, just an overview, because of course there's so many things that are used to pull this off, so to speak, that it would require a huge amount of time to deal with it in detail. But at least for the benefit of I was just going to say, if you want, I can at this point go into some of my thoughts about the motivation and purposes of this program, the historical precedents for it, and also definitely some overview of the techniques and technologies used. So just by way of introduction then, for the more general comments that I have, about the system. There's really, of course, no adequate name for it. So, I mean, one that occurs to me is, it may sound extreme to people who haven't experienced this, but as I said, given what I've been through and what many others have, it's not extreme at all. It's just properly descriptive, and so one could call it the global virtual concentration camp. And at any rate, there are at least several thousand of us targets worldwide in that system. So again, for the benefit of those who may be hearing about this the first time or the second time, I'd like to spend the rest of my talking about it, about the key questions of what it is, at least to the extent that I can characterize it in my own mind about it, having thought about it for years, of course, why it exists and how it's done. So first of all, the motivation and purposes. Well, of course, we don't have the planning documents, the meeting notes of the architects and managers of this really heinous, outrageous program. So we can only speculate as plausibly as possible. You know, there are various theories put forth. I certainly can't claim to know more definitively than anybody else. It's just in my own mind I've come up with what seems to be somewhat more plausible than some other things, but nothing that I've said is nothing that I'm going to say is really terribly original. Of course, I mean, a lot of people have been thinking about this, the targets. So one possibility is that it's some sort of extrajudicial punishment system, with the vast majority of targets not having done anything seriously wrong or really wrong at all, and thus it's used. And thus those targets, the vast majority of them, are used only as target practice to help establish, maintain, and extend the system. This can be adopted by every country, of course, and in fact that's apparently what's happened. I mean, I've gone to various countries and it's continued, and from all that I've heard, it's certainly a global system. Maybe somewhere in Mongolia it's not in place, but that's probably just because we haven't heard from Mongolian targets. At any rate, each country then, under that idea of what it is, would have the freedom to select its own targets and operate accordingly within its own borders, and just then cooperating with the other countries by handling other targets visiting or relocating from elsewhere. So that's sort of the minimal explanation of what this is. Even so, of course, it seems very strange to people, and of course it is, but truth is stranger than fiction. A second possibility, and these incidentally are not mutually exclusive necessarily at all, these ideas of what this is. But the second idea of what it is primarily is that it's some sort of, you know, global non-consensual testing program by psychologists, psychiatrists, the medical community, using biomedical products such as implants and so forth, nanotechnologies, and as also, of course, importantly, manufacturers of directed energy weapons. A third possibility is that, again, a third possibility, not mutually exclusive necessarily at all, is that it's a covert system of maintaining political control, again, with the vast majority of targets used as target practice. And so do we have any examples of this actually being some sort of political control, as opposed to those most of us who are really just sort of almost random victims, or with really flimsy pretexts in my case? Well, witness the following quite high-profile electromagnetic weapons targeting incidents that are actually quite well documented. Incidentally, Hans, I'm noticing now some sort of slight feedback, choppy feedback of what I'm saying. Do you still hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. I'll just continue then. Okay. Just let me know if either in our Skype session or talking to me if I am dropping out. So these examples of actual usage for political purposes, I'm mentioning these following examples that, as I said, are really quite well documented. The first that I know of for sure was the involved women who were part of the Greenham Common Peace protest movement They were protesting cruise missiles at a U.S. missile base in England in 1980. They reported various neurological symptoms that clearly correlated with the effects, the bioeffects of microwave weaponry, directed energy weapons, in other words. A second example is the Bhutan government consultant Thich Nath Rizal during his imprisonment in 1988 to 1998 after having revealed government corruption. And he documented this in a book that he had published in 2009 called Torture Killing Me Softly. And what he experienced included, well, torture of various kinds using electromagnetic weapons, mind reading, and dream manipulation. So very similar to, really extremely similar to what the vast majority of targets are experiencing, at least those of us who have more than just the street theater and thefts and that type of thing. A third example is the president of Honduras, Manuel Zelaya, after he was deposed in a coup d'etat back in 2009, and he was seeking refuge in the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa in September of that year. And he experienced various things, including what he characterized as, well, I guess I'm trying to remember exactly the words he used, but it essentially was electromagnetic induction of pain and that sort of thing. And then a fourth example is the opposition candidate for vice president in Taiwan last year, September 2011. I'm not good at pronouncing Chinese, but it looks like his name would be something like Lin Rue Xiong. And he mentioned that he was attacked by electromagnetic waves for 3 consecutive nights in that month. In fact, he even cited the specific frequency. So, of course, these things are all denied or even just ignored by the governments involved, and not to mention the vast majority of mainstream media. But at any rate, these are 4 incidents that did take place. And then a final possibility, or additional motivation for this global program, would be the actual preparation of future overt suppression of all or the vast majority of the population of the world, and in fact, even possibly the reduction of the global population by what's been characterized as the shadow government, the New World Order, whatever term you want to use. Given the absolute outrageousness of what's been happening to us targets, this cannot be discounted. This cannot be dismissed as a possibility in my mind. I mean, it certainly can be the case. At any rate, so then we move into what I would characterize as, are there any historical precedents for this? I mean, some people will say, oh, there's just no such thing like this. Well, of course, in a strict sense, there's no such thing like anything that ever happens in a strict sense, because nothing ever happens that's an exact duplicate of an event in the past, obviously. Somebody has characterized history as not repeating itself, for instance, but that it rhymes. Of course, that's a poetic way. That's totally totally opposite of the nature of what we're dealing with here. But the idea is, though, that there are, I mean, constantly new technologies, new political systems, or new ways of thinking, whatever, that come along that have no exact parallel with anything in the past. So people who like to just dismiss this whole idea of what, in fact, the reality of what's happening by saying, oh, and nothing like this has ever happened. Well, again, you know, did genocide ever take place before the late 19th century against the Armenians, and then, of course, against the Jews, Gypsies, and others by the Nazis in the 30s and the 40s and so forth? Well, I mean, not really, except for, in a way, there was something, you could say. It was called the well, the term escapes me, but it was an ancient king of in Asia Minor who actually had ordered thousands of Roman citizens. In fact, best estimates about 80,000 citizens killed as quickly as possible. So there's a term for that event that happened around, oh, I don't know, it was around something like 80 BC or something. So, but of course, it wasn't exactly like the Armenian genocide and so forth. So I'm just saying that you know, in a way, sure, there's no exact historical parallel, but that's not proof at all that this is not happening by any means whatsoever. And it is interesting to note a couple of things now. I just mentioned these quickly. For people who are interested in looking at the Bible, I'm not citing this for historical purposes, but the idea is, in fact, sort of latent in this. It's a verse from Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 24, that says, "Cursed is he who strikes his neighbor in secret." So it's interesting. I mean, the idea of basically engaging, humans engaging and organizing in deniable harm against more vulnerable people, that idea has obviously existed, therefore, since antiquity. And we don't just have to rely upon Deuteronomy for that. In fact, the ancient non-democratic Greek state of Sparta had the H.A.A.R.P, which was a secret system that they put in place of sending its highest achieving young men who had completed their militaristically oriented training every fall of every year to persecute and even kill some of these semi-enslaved helots who farmed fields and supported the free population. And this was done, in fact, for one or more purposes. We can't be sure exactly which. The historical sources are not full enough for us to know exactly which of these, but perhaps all of them. One was certainly a practice in covert surveillance. So these young men had they were on their own, and they were therefore engaged in stealing the food, as well as again killing helots. And then secondly, it was actually, well, in fact, this as I said, the covert surveillance was one, and then that military education and covertly stealing food and killing. Because in fact, if the youths were, if they were caught, they were whipped. They weren't given more extreme punishment, of course, even if they killed, but they were punished if they were caught. So in fact, stealth was definitely an intentional part of what was to be learned. Okay, then a third aspect of that was that, in fact, many people have interpreted, many historians have interpreted the H.A.A.R.P as, in fact, a form of secret police that existed there. And then fourthly, it was perhaps a form of population control, because the idea being that, you killed off, even though they were farming for the community at large, I guess the idea was that they didn't, that they might pose some sort of threat to the rulers. So that I found that to be quite an interesting parallel. Now, going forward in time to modern times, I can just say, take something as undeniable, of course, it has existed since humans have existed, the crime of murder. Okay. And people think, well, how can you get away with that? Well, actually, FBI statistics in the U.S. show that a third of murder cases in the U.S. are never closed. That is to say, the killers are never brought to justice in a third of murders. And of course, those are the crimes that the authorities take most seriously. So when you think about it, obviously, much lesser crimes can be gotten away with very considerable ease, and that's even using conventional techniques. Okay, so I mean, this idea that they couldn't possibly get away with, people couldn't possibly get away with it, that's just total utter errant nonsense. And then finally, we move into more sinister precedents for what's happening now. In the U.S., which is what I know best in terms of its history, there's really a long history of non-consensual medical testing by the authorities, and this began no later than the deliberate infection of prisoners with cholera in the Philippines in 1907 by a doctor, incidentally educated at Harvard, and it continued this history of non-consensual medical testing with the 40-year-long test known for the fact that blacks who had black males who had syphilis were deliberately not helped by the doctors they went to, and this was totally unacknowledged for 40 years. The authorities got away with this totally for 40 years, and then it was just a fluke. Somebody just happened to be able to come across, I think, I don't know if it even was somebody who spoke about it or whatever. At any rate, after 4 decades, it finally came to light, and it stopped, but that stopped. But then other things, of course, undeniable, absolutely fully documented things like ionizing radiation experiments for decades in the U.S. And who did this take place on? Babies, children, prisoners, patients, and of course, just the random sort of persons they could grab and inflict with this, just to see what the results were of putting in plutonium or whatever it was, inserting it into somebody to see what bio effects occurred. So this was engaged in not just by a few people, but by many people when you think about it. It's not just nefarious governmental agents, it was doctors, nurses, whatever. Of course, not all of them by any means, but the fact is that this permeated society when you think of it collectively, doing this sort of thing, and thinking that there was really, a greater purpose involved. I don't know whether it was the Cold War, whatever justification, now it's terrorism or whatever, but it's, so at any rate, then we have, of course, also as part of the Cold War experiments, what's called MK-Ultra. There are various terms for really I think more than 100 projects that were involved with MK-Ultra. And if people have heard about this, it's usually just the LSD testing. I'm hearing some interference here, various noise and all this, but at any rate, there were also other substances used, but also various techniques, including, interestingly enough, electronic methods of mind control, and various aspects of mind control. Hypnotizing somebody, putting in subliminal suggestions, and that sort of thing. So the electronic methods included methods of remote electronic influencing of behavior. And this was done even in the early 60s. Now, we don't know the details of all these programs, unfortunately, because all the records, except for just basically the accounting records for MK-Ultra, were destroyed, and quite deliberately, by the people at the head of the CIA back in the early 70s when this started coming to light. But needless to say, even after all of these atrocities were admitted to some extent or another, no one was ever prosecuted or punished for these crimes. No one. Okay, so I mean, people have been getting away, therefore, with this sort of deniable crimes as perpetrated by the governmental authorities in a supposedly more or less free country for over a century. And then we can also mention the this is not just non-consensual medical testing, but let's take something like extrajudicial punishment. Now, this is usually associated with openly tyrannical or at least openly repressive regimes, like, of course, in the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany, that sort of thing. But in fact, it has also happened in various presumptively democratic ones as well. For instance, in the U.S., lynching was a popular form of overt extrajudicial punishment. It was, of course, overwhelmingly used against blacks, but in fact, what's often not known is that there were actually a fair number of lynchings of whites too. So, in fact, this was at that time in place. People got away with it, inflicting this. Now, much less open was the police repression of various unpopular groups in the U.S. for well over a century, including union organizers and peaceful political radicals. And this was carried out through what's called the Red Squads that existed within the police departments of many big cities in the U.S., beginning actually in the late 1800s. There was also the American Protection League, active in World War I, where war resistors, even peaceful protesters, were beaten in organized and officially condoned fashion. And incidentally, that seems to have been farmed out to various private entities. It wasn't just governmental agents doing this. And of course, then moving forward in time, we've got the FBI's COINTEL, the COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program of the 50s to at least 1980, if not beyond. In fact, some people say, well, it still continues, even if, of course, they've renamed it. And that featured infiltration and persecution of suspected communists and other political radicals, or who were termed, let's put it this, people who were termed political radicals. So that gives an overview of deniable harm inflicted against people by parts of governments, let's put it that way. Now, I've heavily emphasized the U.S., of course, but this sort of thing went on elsewhere too, of course. So that gives you some idea of that. Now I'd like to just give a very brief overview of the techniques and technologies, and this is where the information becomes vast, and people will just have to do more digging to flesh out the broad outlines that I'm going to give. But I'm going to try to give what I think are some salient techniques and technologies that continue to be used or have been used in the recent past. So just as an overview, I'm quoting now from the CIA's Human Resource Exploitation Training Manual of 1983. This is a quote, okay? This document is available online even, it's at any rate, this is a quote: "The purpose of all coercive techniques is to induce psychological regression in the subject by bringing a superior outside force to bear on his will to resist. Regression is basically a loss of autonomy, a reversion to an earlier behavioral level. As the subject regresses, his learned personality traits fall away in reverse chronological order. He begins to lose the capacity to carry out the highest creative activities, to deal with complex situations, to cope with stressful interpersonal relationships, or to cope with repeated frustrations." End quote. And you can see in what I'm about to mention that the following techniques and technologies are beautifully matched with this so lovely humane goal that the CIA had in their 1983 manual. So, for instance, and just along these lines, I'll quote also from the Doctrine for Joint Psychological Operations, the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. military, from a publication. This is obviously entirely unclassified, or it's been declassified at any rate, from the 5th of September 2003, page I-5. "The above missions highlight the fact that PSYOPs, psychological operations, are a force multiplier and one of the most effective non-lethal weapons available." So, at any rate, that helps to give an explanation of why this isn't just electronic methods. It's also there are various, obviously many psychological aspects of that too, but why there's really the full spectrum of persecution techniques and technologies that are used. And of course, these include such age-old proven techniques of deniable injury, assault, and denial of rights, like slander, libel, and other lies that help to enlist the willing dupes that are at the very bottom of these, at the very bottom level of this vast program, to carry out the harassment, to blackball targets into losing jobs, and against their getting new ones, that sort of thing. Okay, so I mean, that's obviously as old as the human race. Also, I'm sure as old as the human race is poisoning. And of course, the particular poisons used, they're refined now to the point where, well, there's so many of them that they can't possibly be all tested for. So basically, essentially, people can get away with poisoning people with no adverse punishment whatsoever. And of course, poison doesn't leave behind fingerprints either. So it's very easy to do this sort of thing. And then, of course, there's the century-old techniques of surreptitious entry of locked and now alarmed buildings. And there's all sorts of techniques for that. I mean, there's lock-picking equipment that's available. I mean, there's all sorts of techniques, bump locks. I can't begin to name them all, but, this is they're abundant, okay? It's just the authorities like to pretend they don't exist, but they definitely exist. Okay, then of course, we move on to the some of the novel techniques that we can enable, or I say that are enabled through the program through what's called organized stalking. And this is deniable because it's almost always, these sorts of things are almost like street theater or vandalism or theft or whatever. They're almost always carried out by strangers. That is to say, people who are not known by the targets. Okay, and those strangers, they're lied to about who these targets are. You know, in some cases we know they're told vicious lies like the targets are, you know, supposedly pedophiles or that type of thing. So at any rate, of course, everybody hates a pedophile. So of course, then, you know, they can even get people to volunteer and do their part, so to speak, in some cases without even getting paid. Of course, sometimes they coerce people, or sometimes the people are in a difficult situation, like ex-prisoners or whatever. Maybe even undocumented immigrants. That type of thing. You know, there are a variety of people who can be used. And at any rate, and they're trained in techniques that are unprovable by the target, typically. And they're, you know, again, each getting only small and separate tasks of the harassment to carry out. So even if they were even think of blabbing to the authorities, if they weren't actually gotten rid of before then, they really wouldn't be able to attest anything except for what they themselves did. So there's really there would be nothing in it for them to do that whatsoever. And then we have the phenomenon that's been studied by psychologists of the fact that what's called inattentional blindness, and that is to say that there are various things that can be done that you know, even in open that most people who aren't the target, or people who are the target, don't even notice. So very subtle things. They've proven that sort of thing does in fact happen very easily. Psychologically, they're for instance, what's called the invisible gorilla test. That's where somebody actually dressed up in a gorilla suit slowly goes through a crowd of people, or not that many people, playing pickup basketball, whatever, and the observers notice the person in the gorilla suit moving through the players. At any rate, and even if they do, these things are sporadic. What is a stranger going to notice? One event that's, of course, short murder that takes place against somebody. So they're not going to be wanting to get involved for that. They're not going to want to intervene. So therefore, you know, things take place in public even very easily as a result. I mean, even 50 years ago, half a century ago, this started happening where even people were killed in public, and nobody bothered even to call the police. The infamous example of that is a woman by the name of Kitty Genovese in New York City in the early 60s, as I said, a half a century ago. So, you know, the idea that, oh, this can't happen because people would call the police or the authorities, that's just balderdash. And in fact, much of the effect of this stalking is due to the hugely greater frequency of events, of incidents that are perpetrated against targets than against other people that might, you know, a random sort of event of unpleasantness, whatever might happen to somebody else, oh, I don't know, once every few months at most, or, you know, if we're talking about something like theft or stalk or vandalism or something like that. But, you know, with stalking targets, we're talking about things that happen every day. So, at any rate, we have also evidence of the fact that individuals are organized to carry out surveillance and other things against targeted individuals. I say targeted individuals now in the broad sense. Okay, for instance, present-day China. This was revealed by or estimated by a human rights organization concerned with Chinese issues, but it happens to be located in the U.S., called the Dewey Hua Foundation. And they estimate that approximately 1 million or more persons are used by the government to surveil, that is to say, covertly monitor not only political dissidents, but even ordinary citizens who happen to complain about local corruption. Okay, so this idea that, oh, this sort of thing only took place in the old Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and all that's nonsense too, of course. There's also an indirect admission to this in the U.S. by Department of Justice 2009 report called Stalking Victimization. Now, of course, that concentrated on people who the majority of people who are stalked by, like a jilted lover or an ex-spouse or that type of thing. But in fact, almost 1 in 5 stalking victims, according to that report, experience multiple or unknown number of stalkers, and about 1 in 10 stalking victims report that those carrying out the stalking are really totally unknown to them. So that would suggest that this, in fact, really is involving, at least say in the U.S., so I don't know, perhaps as many as several 100,000 individuals who are targeted individuals. So having dealt with the historical precedents for this sort of thing, and for broad-based techniques like this, now I'm going to move into more about the technology. So in terms of monitoring, unprecedented monitoring capabilities now exist, have existed really for several decades. And this includes see-through-the-wall radar. For instance, X-band, Y-band. So, you can have even a stone wall or whatever, and movements can be detected behind that through radar. And this, of course, can be used for the good. Obviously, if you're talking about a structure that's been blown up or collapsed or whatever, and you're trying to locate people who might still be alive, or even just the corpses of the dead body of the victims, then of course this can be used to help find those bodies. But of course, it can be used abusively too, like so much technology. There's also the really almost practically admitted and undeniable comprehensive collection and analysis of all electronic conversations, messages, and so forth, phone calls, by the NSA and other agencies in the U.S. Okay, and this involves actually billions and billions of such conversations and messages and so forth. In fact, they're just opening up now a huge facility in Utah just to process and analyze this sort of data. There's also, of course, tracking that you can do through the cell phone infrastructure. I mean, it's well known that unless you remove the battery of your cell phone, most modern cell phones can actually be tracked by the cell phone provider, and of course then in turn by the authorities. And undoubtedly is. In fact, we know of many instances like this. And so I should mention, in terms of one more thought about this, people would say, well, oh, I don't know, this still seems, how can it still be? Well, I think now I'm listing some things that enable one to realize this, and just in a general way, it should be noted that about 50 years ago, a man by the name, as I believe, of Thomas Kuhn wrote a book about the nature of scientific revolutions, and he talked about certain developments, inventions, discoveries, and so forth, so changed the nature of science and technology that in order to accommodate these things into explanations, now when you think about this, this is really the case with politics, social political aspects of existence as well, and in fact, in this case, facilitated through unprecedented scientific and technological inventions and discoveries, developments. So it really, people should try to move away from this notion that, oh, it can't happen and so forth. Well, I never heard about it happening. Well, of course, people never heard about all sorts of things happening. It doesn't mean that they don't happen. And in fact, I've given already, I think, quite conclusive evidence that all sorts of things are happening, and certainly all sorts of technology. Now, I will now move into talking about carrying out deniable attacks on people remotely through directed energy weapons and other electromagnetic technologies. These directed energy weapons, these are really, I mean, they've been in development for a while now, as I'll mention, but that really represent still novel ways of transferring energy at a distance, and concentrated energy. So again, in most people's technological scientific education doesn't extend to their full knowledge about these sorts of things, but in fact they do exist. They're not science fiction at all. For instance, when Gorbachev in the Soviet Union was still in power in 1986, he mentioned that there, at that time, that there were already new non-nuclear weapons such as radio wave, infrasonic, and other weapons, which in terms of their destructive potential could be no less dangerous than already existing weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so I mean, you have admissions, therefore, by the highest levels of authority, and the Soviets certainly at that time, they did have this technology, as will become apparent. Now, this technology encompasses several aspects of human existence. One is just the, we're not talking about necessarily the infliction of pain here, but we're talking about remote neurological or neural monitoring. Okay, now, in some ways, in a way, this already goes back to 1931, in that there was, at that time, a primitive mind-reading capability that was developed by a scientist named E. Jacobson at the Physiological Laboratory of the University of Chicago, as documented in the American Journal of Physiology in that year, volume 97, and that article was entitled "Electrical Measurements of Neuromuscular States During Mental Activities." Okay, and what he found was, this is a quote from that article, during imagination, recollection, and concrete or abstract thinking involving words or numbers, muscular contractions characteristically appear as specific components of the physiologic process of mental activity. These contractions generally are minute, but sometimes are grossly visible. Okay, so keep in mind this is 1931. Okay, now, as I've already mentioned, there was, beginning in the 50s, early 60s, there was already under the MK-Ultra project, some sub-projects that researched and developed, no doubt, the remote influencing of behavior by electronic means. Okay, as I said, we don't know any more than that, the public doesn't, because at least the records were supposedly all destroyed except for the accounting records. Then we have a very key development that was first, well, actually started to become apparent in the testing of radar equipment and the use of radar equipment after World War II. So going back to the late 40s, you had technicians who were mentioning to their colleagues, this wasn't documented in a peer-reviewed journal, but that this certainly was being reported by such technicians, that they heard clicks and noises within their cranium as a result of stray electromagnetic waves emanating from radar. Okay, radar equipment. So this first started. This is often called the Frey effect, after a scientist named Frey, F-R-E-Y, documented it in a peer-reviewed journal back in the early 1960s. Unfortunately, I don't have the precise reference here, but it's easily found. Then, developing further, of course, anything like noises electronically can obviously be modulated for specific purposes and shaped into waves that resemble or mimic very closely voices. Obviously, that's an electronic technology that exists in some ways. I'm not talking now about specific remote induction of voices, but I'm just saying that electronic technique, or those electronic techniques of shaping noises into specific waves and wave patterns that can cause, therefore, precisely desirable sound effects. Obviously, that's a technology that already started being used for many decades now. But specifically, the remote transmission of voices and other sounds into the skulls of persons via microwaves was first demonstrated in 1974 by Joseph H.A.A.R.P, using, as I recall, equipment that was designed by the electrical engineer and professor James C. Lynn. His name will come up in a moment. At any rate, that was documented by Don Justison in a peer-reviewed journal called The American Psychologist of March 1975. So again, at that point already in the open, unclassified literature, we have irrefutable evidence of the ability to induce voices remotely through electronic means. And since it's microwaves, it can go through various kinds. So this can be carried out, you know, against somebody in an apartment or some other building or whatever. It It shouldn't be a problem. At any rate, in fact, this electrical engineering professor I just mentioned, James Lynn, mentions in his 1978 book, Microwave Auditory Effects and Applications, quote, I quote from page 176, the capability of communicating directly with humans by pulsed microwaves is obviously not limited to the field of therapeutic medicine, end quote. So just think about that for a second. Obviously he was, you know, if you're talking about the non-therapeutic application, of course this can be used for obviously very nefarious, really evil purposes. And most people don't know anything about this, but it's indisputable, this technology. At any rate, many patented methods of remote neurological influence exist. And I should point out, because a lot of people, even in the TI community, say that, well, patents don't prove anything. Okay, in a way, nothing proves anything, but in fact, notice, and this is really not usually noted, that U.S. patent law requires that a patented machine or device must operate to perform the intended purpose, and that a patent cannot be obtained upon a mere idea or suggestion, end quote. Okay. Also, keep in mind that many inventions have been protected under secret U.S. patents, and those exist. Obviously, we don't know in the unclassified community what those are exactly, but they can cover, obviously, things like weapons and things like this, of course. The fact that secret U.S. patents exist, that's but that is the case. And I should mention subliminal suggestions. Those can be remotely transmitted into a person's brain using, there's several patents for this, but the best known is a man by the name of Lowry. I forget his first name. He developed something called the silent sound system. And that was apparently first used in the first Gulf War. Remember when all the fleeing Iraqi soldiers suddenly gave up without a struggle? Apparently, it seems to be the case that the subliminal suggestion of surrender was heavily induced in them to do so. At any rate, similar technology has been used and continues to be used to discourage shoplifting by subliminal messaging in many large stores in the United States and undoubtedly worldwide since at least 1979. That's 33 years ago, when it was mentioned in an article in Time magazine. Okay, and again, that's documented. There's also a reference to it in, I don't know if it's the Institute of Justice, or that's part of the Department of Justice in the United States. But at any rate, this system of deterring shoplifting by subliminal suggestions is being used, and apparently it works quite effectively. It cuts down shoplifting, the incidence of it, quite remarkably. Then we move into, of course, the real pain inflictors here, the actual weapons, directed energy weapons. And again, I'm quoting now from a U.S. Army War College document, obviously totally unclassified, from 1994, called "The Revolution in Military Affairs and Conflict Short of War." This is a quote, okay, from two men who wrote in this journal, okay, that's sponsored by the U.S. Army War College, the Strategic Studies Institute. The advantage of directed energy weapons over conventional ones is deniability. Against whom is such deniability aimed? And then there is a part of a text, but in fact then it continues, deniability must be aimed at the American people, who do not sanction the imprisonment, much less execution of individuals without a trial. So that's a quote, okay, from this U.S. Army document from 1994. Now, directed energy weapons, again, some people who are not well informed scientifically think that this is all just science fiction, because they just watch movies and TV shows, science fiction TV shows, without actually reading any, without reading the appropriate scientific documents that cover this sort of thing. But in fact, the first plausible implementation of directed energy weapons was proposed by the brilliant, albeit somewhat eccentric genius, Nikola Tesla, when he offered in 1934 to build what he called, at that time, a death ray that would render foreign air forces, or really all air forces, obsolete. Okay, so this was already 1934. Now Tesla had many patents, many actual working examples of all sorts of technology that it was just unprecedented in a way. And in fact, even though there was no overt acceptance apparently by the military at that U.S. military at that time of Tesla's proposal, it is a fact that right after he died, and I'm talking about the day after, I guess, that he died, Tesla, he died in rather semi-impoverished circumstances in a hotel room. All his papers were swept up by government agents, okay, and taken away, confiscated, and in fact classified at that point. So just an interesting observation. Now, in fact, moving to after the World War II, we have actually the first indisputed use of directed energy weapons by the Soviets in the gigahertz range, so apparently microwave weaponry, against the U.S. Embassy in Moscow from 1953 or thereabouts to at least 1975 or maybe even the 1980s. I've read various figures about this. And this caused all sorts of problems, cataracts, tumors, various neurological problems of various kinds. In fact, actually, the U.S. State Department, they didn't really admit to this overtly, that what was going on, but they did, in fact, pay their personnel extra pay to be there at that, to serve in that embassy, because, in fact, it was considered a hazardous post, obviously. Then we also have the public statement by the Russian politician and former army officer Vladimir Zhirinovsky in 1993 and 1994 as well, that Russia had an electronic weapon that he called the ellipton that could destroy any point on the Earth. Okay, so I mean, these are public statements now I'm talking about. Now, going back, in fact, the first U.S. development that's so far been admitted. Keep in mind, all this is unclassified. I'm not quoting anything unclassified, whatever. The first was the U.S. Army's, or the first that I know of, there may be something before this, was the U.S. Army's secret river Styx weapon. This was named after the ancient Greek mythological river of death, incidentally. And this was developed at least no later than 1957, because there's a technical report about this weapon that was declassified in 1979, and on page 53 of that report, that technical report of the U.S. Army, it's called, and this was back in 1957, okay, I quote, "Should developments in this type weapon be undertaken, and should they become known to the public, charges from public and foreign sources that this is an atrocity weapon may be made and should be anticipated." So you already had the authorities. Obviously, it is an atrocity weapon. It can be used, in fact, in various frequencies and various energy levels as a weapon of mass destruction, too. But it can also be used in a way that pinpoints an individual as well. And in fact, the International Review of the Red Cross, in one of its issues in 1990, warned about non-lethal and lethal capabilities of directed energy weapons, because in fact these weapons are often called rather innocuously, oh, non-lethal weapons, as if you know, it's good because it's short of killing people. Yeah, but in fact it really, they can be used. In fact, it's sort of hard to visualize they're not being used in a way that's short of an atrocity. And in fact, the retired government microwave specialist and British agent Dr. Barry Trower has now given a number of speeches about the adverse effects of microwaves, especially in carrying out remote harm on individuals. And in fact, it's even mentioned how it's been it has been used, this type of technology, on athletes and politicians, you know, by of various countries, by other countries, of course, to hurt the performance of those athletes, or of course to carry out you know, political harm against those other countries. And in fact, there's practically an infinite variety of effects that can be obtained against both property and humans through directed energy weapons. For instance, there's a patent for a device, and there's also mention of this in a technical report by an organization that mentions how there's I mean, this device that can, in one mode, can automatically stop an engine of a vehicle from a distance. In another mode, it can be carried. It can actually cause a person to be incapacitated. So that's why I say these sorts of things, the effects are really considerable, and that's why that's something very important to keep in mind when you hear about and read about various effects that are mentioned by a lot of targeted individuals about things. I mean, it seems so incredible. Sometimes it may be that people are mentioning things and they're in fact trying to discredit targets. That certainly does exist as well. But nevertheless, the effects are extraordinary, really, for somebody who's not familiar with this technology. And now I'll just mention some other past and current unclassified, remotely operating coercive electromagnetic technologies that including these proven devices that can work at a distance. Okay, one of them is now the half-century, some 50-year-old technology developed by the Soviets called the LIDA machine. That's L-I-D-A. And in various frequencies, it can either, say, for instance, put somebody to sleep, or, in fact, keep somebody awake. So it can be used for sleep deprivation purposes as well. And in fact, it's very important to note that sleep deprivation is a classic technique, of course, practiced by corrupt police, by repressive regimes, and so forth, to break down the health and resistance of, prisoner, target, whoever it is. I mean, anybody cracks after a while, given sufficient sleep deprivation and pain. It's just a matter of, continuing to increase the intensity and the frequency to the point where somebody basically just collapses in one way or the other. So that's one example. Then there's also the fact that microwave ovens. Now, this is a very mundane example in a way, because of course I'm not suggesting that these are being used to target us, target individuals, but these can be used, for instance, through the wall to carry out a lot of very injurious, very serious health effects against people, because they can be weaponized. And in fact, there's even a patent to do this, but in fact, it requires no specific great skill on anybody's part to weaponize microwave ovens. You just take off the front cover and keep the latch taped. So I mean, you can continue to then operate the oven. Obviously that's just an overview of how it's done, but it can be very easily done. Then there's also, for instance, a pain inflictor for supposedly controlling mobs and rioting crowds, called the active denial system. It's gone through various name changes and so forth. Again, I don't suggest that this particular device is being used, but it just illustrates the fact that pain can be inflicted at a distance. And there's even a way in the patent that it suggests that people who wear a certain tag would not be targeted. So that's a very interesting clue to the fact of how these things can be personalized and individualized. Then there's also something called the Medusa voice-to-skull transmitter, which can really deliver incapacitatingly loud and just injurious intracranial transmission of sound and noise. And Peter Rosenholm has talked about that a lot, and in fact it does seem to be very effective in doing that sort of thing. And then there's something else called the epic balance disruptor. And now again, all these things I've mentioned, they're not just documented in patents. These are proven technologies. And of course, as I said, there's many other U.S. patents though that illustrate a variety of non-classified capabilities, including the ability to remotely detect thought through EEG waves and that type of thing. I mean, brain waves through, and also influencing in turn. For instance, the same patent from around 1976, I believe, or thereabouts, that can remotely detect brain waves in a person can also change those waves and then retransmit back to the person, which obviously suggests that they can be used to change the thought to some extent of that person. And there's various other patents for radio frequency weapons and all this. All those are non-classified weapon patents. Of course, I have no access to classified documents of any kind. But this, when you think about it, There are many things that probably are far more capable than I've been even talking about that are effectively kept secret and entirely unacknowledged. And how is this the case? Everybody thinks, oh, we can't keep secret for long. Well, in fact, that's wrong. People who have involvement, direct experience with classified technology have later mentioned that, in fact, most secrets do remain secrets. For instance, in fact, the governmental secrecy expert William Arkin has written that, quote, most genuine secrets ironically remain secret. It's only ironic because most people think, oh, it all comes out anyways. Well, it doesn't. Okay. Would-be defectors, this is another aspect of how you can keep something secret. Would-be defectors are credibly deterred by their first-hand participation and observation of what this technology can do. That is to say, if it can carry out pain, and even worse, of course, basically, for instance, remote infliction of a heart attack, and that's something that was even mentioned in the 1982 U.S. Air Force document, for instance, using microwaves, the remote infliction of a fatal heart attack in the heart muscle. Then obviously, you know, anybody who would even be slightly thinking about, well, gee, maybe the ethical issues here are bad enough that maybe I should disclose this to the press or something. They're not going to want to do that, either for themselves or their family, their loved ones or friends or whatever. They're not going to want to risk disclosing this. So of course it can remain very secret, and that's what I mean about the unprecedented nature of this. It's not like previous secret programs, like even say the Tuskegee experiment or whatever, that did eventually come to light because somebody had some pang of conscience or whatever. No, even if you do, those people can be silenced very effectively, and they can be monitored, and through even using through-the-wall radar and so forth, electronic monitoring and so forth, so that their intentions are known in advance. So there really isn't actually very much of a way that this could be disclosed, frankly, because and for the designers of this heinous system, really the monsters, I don't use that term lightly, the monsters who are running this program, for them, for these totally twisted, evil, albeit high-tech individuals, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. You see, Hans, it's just wonderful that they can carry this out in completely seamless, deniable fashion, and they don't have to worry at all. It's just, I mean, it's just really pretty horrible. I mean, forget myself, I mean, or even the targets in general, because, oh, we're just a few thousand, but I mean, the implications for the rest of the human race that gives a darn, they're enormous. They really are. Yes. So in many ways, this is worse than nuclear weapons. I don't say in terms of sheer destruction, but in terms of actual evil that can be perpetrated in a way, and deniably so. It really is, it's almost incomprehensible until you realize, well, this is the technology, this is what governments have done. There are people who are evil who get to the top in power. I mean, you can go back thousands of years to, if you're a Catholic, you can cite St. Augustine, who talked about the libido dominandi, the lust, the actual lust for power, for domination. I mean, that's part of, hopefully, in most people, it's pretty submerged, but that lust for power, it is part of the human psyche. It's undeniable. At any rate, so I guess I pretty much concluded what I wanted to say. Okay, I was just trying to say that I really respect your work because and appreciate you as a person for doing what you do, because even if you're not what we would say as a targeted individual in the specific sense of this global virtual concentration camp system, or whatever however you want to call it. People say it's mind control, whatever, but that's an inadequate term in a way. As I said, it influences all aspects of of a person's existence. But even so, you've demonstrated the ability to think out of the box, to transcend, you know, this thinking that, oh no, this can't be, because people have blinders on, they don't want to think about it, it's too much for them to handle, you know. But you, in fact, really go to the heart of the matter, and I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
I grew up in a capitalistic system, and I'm not saying that I'm an anti-capitalist, but in fact, even when I was fully part of the system, I was fortunate, I guess, even though I had very conservative parents, they weren't robots, at any rate, through whatever fluke, maybe it was just myself, but no, it's my brother too. I mean, we are independent thinkers enough that we didn't just get trapped into buying the latest, gadgets and toys and all that. I mean, I didn't have a deprived childhood, but I certainly, going out into nature, hiking, fishing, whatever. I mean, that was part of. I know to enjoy looking at a sunset, the trees, the wildlife. It's just, I know for me, nature has always been extremely important, and I was lucky and. Growing up, 9 of my growing up years I spent in Colorado, and so we went to the mountains frequently, as I said, to hike, to fish, and just to enjoy the scenery. And it's that's really it's a shame if people can't enjoy that. Even a park or whatever that's free of pollution, more or less. That's something, at least. In fact, I think, I mean, it's not too much to suggest, I think, that at least certain sinister forces at work behind the scenes are really largely to a large extent, are relying upon this, the fact of, just, feed the masses and give them mass entertainment, keep them distracted from the real issues, and keep them involved so much with this that therefore they don't really pay enough attention to what's happening. That's part of it. But of course, even for the persons themselves, as you said, it doesn't really give you very, very much lasting satisfaction. You're really left sort of hollow inside.
Hello, Melanie.
All
yes, hello, Han.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Melanie.
Hi, Dirk.
Hi, Melanie.
First of all, I would like to congratulate Dirk. Hi, Dirk. I would like to commend Dirk for the excellent presentation he has done.
Yeah, it was really great.
It was really amazing, and he had to really, how do you say, presented this in a very, very complete way. And so I really, I don't know if I can say I enjoyed listening to him, because the subject he's talking about is really absolute horrible. But I would like to congratulate him for exposing these crimes in a very, very complete and very good manner, I think. So
thank you, Melanie.
I don't want to take too much time of Dirk's, because today this is about him, but just shortly to introduce myself for people that do not know me. I live in Belgium, just like Dirk. I'm 42 years old. I am of German origin, and since 4 years I suffer of Morgellons, which is an invasion of human tissues by nanotechnology. So I'm also a targeted individual, as Dirk said, a victim of electronic terrorism. I prefer to use this term, because what has been done to us is terrorism, and implanting a person without informed consent with any kind of electronic device, and then torture the person 24 hours around the clock. For me, there's no other word than terrorism, especially as these crimes have, as Dirk has explained very well, really demanded sacrifices. People have died from this. People have committed suicide as well, not being able to take this anymore. So I think the word terrorism is absolutely appropriate to what we are going through. And I think it was very, very brave of Dirk to expose this. And he has obviously prepared very well for this, I don't want to say show, this broadcast tonight. And I hope that, I know that a few others of our friends that are also victims of these technologies are listening and will probably also join tonight. And I hope you will have a good discussion, because it is very, very important that these horrible crimes are exposed, and that appropriately this legislation is created to protect our families, humanity as a whole, and children, our children, the generations that come after us, and us, although we are already the victims of these horrible crimes, and bring them to an end. And we really need to really work hard to expose this, and we really need to provoke a public outcry, I believe, to bring this to an end. So I hope that we will be numerous tonight. I believe we will. That we can have a good discussion, and that this broadcast started by Dirk today will help in the process of raising public awareness and exposing this. I just wanted to say, because you said, you exposed very bravely, Hans, what happened to you, the accident that you had.
Yeah.
And I remember that this was, let's just say, at the high point of our discussions. The snowball was definitely getting momentum then. Then we were more and more victims, more and more people concerned by these abuses that came regularly on the live stream that we too started, and that quite quickly gained momentum. And I was actually quite concerned when that happened to you, because I think it was not a coincidence. I believe that it was kind of linked to the information that we were exposing. And I was a little bit concerned, but fortunately it has not happened again.
No.
And I agree with you. I think it was a warning. They wanted to intimidate
and
you.
I don't care. I really don't care. Even if they beat me up the street again, I continue.
And
it's my
I
life.
hope they got the message that we will not be intimidated, and that we will say what we have to say and bring the truth out.
Of course. Hi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
This stupid mic. I couldn't get it to work. I was trying to talk to Melanie, and of course, maybe it was some of them strange cyber screw ups trying to ruin it for us here, but because Melanie, I know a lot of people online that know a lot about Magellans and could definitely help you out. It's not an unknown thing, that's for sure.
Yes.
So.
Well, you know, obviously it doesn't exist, or how to say, apparently it doesn't exist. Because of course, try to deny
that's just it. Yeah, no. They can say it doesn't exist. Come on, they say all kinds of things don't exist. Geez, I argued with a troll on Dutch Sense's site today, trying to say chemtrails didn't exist. I asked him if he believed in airplanes.
Yeah,
he said he worked on airplanes. I said, I'm glad I don't fly.
Yeah, Dirk and Hans know the story. I actually had a biopsy done by an environmental toxicologist and the chairman of public health here in the university clinic of the material that came out of my skin. So he took samples and he analyzed them under the microscope. He looked at he tried to analyze them on the microscope, and what came back after my insistence to get at least the lab reports, which took about 7 or 8 months, what came back that it was material could not be identified under the microscope. They had never seen anything like that, but at least I have laboratory reports of a biopsy showing unidentified material coming out of my skin that was taken from my skin. And with this, despite that, I was still told I was delusional and Magellans didn't exist. So it's starting to be a little bit amusing.
Yeah, well, there's no such thing as airplanes. The Earth is flat. I mean, like, I don't get it. Where people are trying to come from nowadays. How they can actually walk the street with their head up in the air and look people in the eye and believe the nonsense that they're being fed.
Yeah, I don't understand the doctors, I must say. But okay, I believe it's all part of what Dirk has just exposed very well, that it's a whole cover-up. Imagine it's to protect them from lawsuits. Imagine the court case.
But are we Are we to believe then that it's possible that all the doctors are in on the game and corrupt, or what? They're totally bought up, all of them?
I
I
I
no,
don't know if all of them are in, but I would say that there's certainly some of them are in. And for my particular case, that I just explained with the lab report, took where it took so much time to receive them, it is actually quite yeah, particular what happened. I went to the doctor. Well, went to many doctors, dermatologists, and any doctors that you think of, who all couldn't help me. They could just tell me that it's not a parasite. It's nothing living, but that was all. And finally, I decided myself to go to the university clinic and to meet this environmental toxologist that I had looked up, and asked him if he could take this material, well, do a biopsy and analyze it live under the microscope. And what was very interesting with this is that, first of all, he was very enthusiastic. He was very, yeah, intrigued by this. He had never heard about Magellans or about anything. He had never seen anything like this. So the first reaction was, I would say, the one of a natural reaction of a scientist that is confronted with something he has never seen. So he, yeah, gave this to the laboratory and asked them to put pressure on them to analyze this material, to try to identify the material that he took out of my skin himself. By the way, he took the sample himself. And as time went by, I didn't have any news. I had to, call him again, try to speak to him, send him emails, left messages with the secretary, who was starting to get more and more elusive. And then, at the end, I had to pressure him really, because at the same time I was involved in a custody case where my son was taken away from me because his father claimed I was delusional. And so I needed to prove also for this court case that I was not delusional, and so I put pressure on him more and more increasingly. But I mean, I was totally right. It's not normal to get lab report for that. It takes several months to get lab reports. So I put more pressure on him, and I said, well, I need these lab reports, And well, he didn't reply. So at the end, I had to threaten him. I had to file a complaint with the direction of the hospital. And I had to say, well, if you don't give these laboratory reports that are now a couple of months old to me, I'm obliged to file a complaint with the Association of Physicians. Finally, I then did get them, and they stated that the case could not be solved. It's unidentifiable material. I've never seen anything like that. It's inorganic. That's what I could say. But in conclusion, he said that the patient is delusional and should be referred to psychological help, because we don't know what this material is, but we don't think it's particularly dangerous. So she should be reassured and referred to psychiatric care or given psychological assistance, because the disease the person is suffering from, the patient suffering from, is obviously something like delusions of parasitosis. Although we could not identify the material that we took ourselves from her skin, she is delusional, and she needs some psychological help to help her to overcome these delusions. So this is this is how it is. This is the reality. Marie, from Sweden, who's just joining us, has Morgellons herself, so she can fill us in with her part of the treatment that you usually receive as a Morgellons patient by doctors, which is this kind of that I've just explained, that there was a laboratory report that took the samples from this material.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask was.
The conclusion was that I was delusional and needed a psychiatrist.
That's what I wanted to ask is, okay, we know about Magellan, so what are we doing, or what do we know about dealing with it? To hell with the doctors. I mean, if they want to play some pharmaceutical money game, then go away. You're not really performing your or your oath, right? I mean, where's your
Absolutely, yeah.
hypocritic oath that you swore to, and you're not a doctor anymore if all you want is money and you don't want to help people unless you get paid.
Yeah, as you said, I would call them hypocrites, in fact. You know, if they're not doctors, they're hypocrites to me. So yeah, that is true. Absolutely, they do not perform what they're trained to be, what they're there for. They do not do their job. That is clear. They are covering up for the military-industrial complex. So what you said, what can we do about it? How can we prove this? What can we do? Is that well, Marie, Dirk, and myself, we are linked with an organization which is called the International Center Against Abuse of Covered Technologies, which is an organization that defends victims of a technology as we are, and that has the aim of giving these victims proof, giving them evidence, which is usually done by a radio frequency scanning, which means that the person is scanned with a device. And there's Tonya, who's now joining us, who has a lovely sister here in Brussels, who have recently met. So, who is also aware of this. So people are scanned by a radio frequency scanner to measure if they emit radio frequency, which is not normal for the human body to emit a radio frequency. I have already been scanned and I came up positive, which means that it could be measured that I myself my body emits a radio frequency. So this is the first step, I would say, to provide us with evidence in view of getting to court. So this is what we can do. I agree with you. Forget the doctors; they're no help. I mean, I have tried for years and years and years with doctors to get help. All I got is that I was either delusional or that they couldn't help me. So I believe we need to take a different approach with this. Is ourselves in our situation, which is really horrible. We're basically tortured 24 hours around the clock. Is to take this supplementary burden and bring ourselves the proof, so that will, I believe, eventually prove our case correct, and hopefully we can take this to court.
Yeah, I see there are now more people here. For example, Mary.
I think Marie is still joining us, and Antonia is here now.
Okay, and then Love. Okay.
Hello, hello everyone.
Hello, Marie.
I can. I'm my own doctor, so that's true what Melanie said, because I was in hospital. I think 4 or 5 years ago, and in 1 month in the dermatologic clinic, and that was my I lose in that time, because in my files they write that this is delusion. See how I look today, but I really looking good today. If I look back 1 year, 2 year, and I thought when I was back in I think 3 months ago to the hospital, now they will see, because I've been without my hair in 4 years, and I have this film, and you can see the fibers. I'm alive proof. But in that time, I really understand they will not talk about it, because now I have also done a psychologic research that I'm not delusional, and I'm not have some psychological problems. So I have that papers too. So now the problem is, because before they could say, oh, she's delusional, but now they cannot. But I am still in the same condition. Not really, because I have like I said, been my own doctor, and that is not. I can recommend it to everybody who has Morgellons, because it's easy to harm yourself, and it takes me many years to understand how I should do and get rid of these fibers and the electrical wires I have on me, and even if I have lived with these for 5, 6, 7 years, I don't know, and all around everything the other, it's amazing to see what I have in my skin that I can prove, and the doctors will not talking about it. It's little. Sometimes I always, when I go, I talking about how I draw out the fibers. And last week I said to the, I was not a psychiatrist, but that was in that area, and I said to her, he asked me how I felt, and I said, yeah, I felt up and down, and tell her about all my allergic reactions and electricity and everything, and I still going on with talking about how I pull out the fibers, because I know they must write what I tell them, and that is crazy. I said to her, if I was you and there was a person who come to you every month and tell, I draw out my fibers, of course, if I was crazy, I have been look like awful every time I come to you. But you can see, I look better and better for every month. But she didn't. She didn't. She have no answer.
But in Mary, how are you drawing your fibers? Are you using lemon and orange, or
I do a lot. I try Dr. Will Spencer product, and that was the best, because it likes the electric this what it is, or if it's implants or it's Morgellons fiber or whatever it is, but it going up, it coming up, because I was so swollen before, so I couldn't even see my pores, or it looked like I was I have drink too much alcoholic or take cortisone, but
puffing up? You were puffing up.
yeah, really, and I'm really skinny, and I remember that time. That was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I began to blowing up, and but I felt that was like my muscles and my bones was like meal. I think I would be. I crashed broken myself, because I felt so weak in my bones, and but after a while I didn't know about Spencer's products, but I began to, and I didn't know about Morgellons in that time either, so I began to try different kind of products, because I have worked with skin for many years, so um, I knew I must do something, because it was like I was strangled and covered, like I couldn't breathe in my skin. I was really in prison for 3 years with these wires. I couldn't do nothing.
We'll find our own solution.
Yeah.
Garlic. I wonder about garlic too. I mean, garlic is so crazy, special kind of a thing.
Garlic, I've tried that too. Not on my scalp and that, but I have found out the garlic is before I have a lot in my this. It felt like my hand was electricity and fire, and then I found out when I do the food, and I have a lot of garlic in my when I cooking, and then that was like I could really see it done something. So I have that is what I have done the last year since I begin to know and read about nanotechnology and what happened to us, because I think the first years when you see these fibers everywhere on the breast, from top to toe, it's so much, it's so horrible, and it takes so much time before, for me, it took that time before I really begin to research, take glasses and do what happens if I take that, and what happens when I do that, and I think because what you say, the doctors, they, I think I should be dead, because I almost was dead 4 years ago, and now when I'm thinking back, and I also tell my sons, and that's horrible of me, but I said to them, if I die, you must observe, look inside me, because this is, I knew already in that time I have something that is not normal. And even if you take a blood test or something, you can't see it. And beginning, the doctors, they give me medication that makes me crazy, and that is make me so upset today when I know all this, because there is so many people, they try to tell me you are depressed, and I said, no, I'm not depressed, I'm stressed and pressed, because I had a company in that time, so of course I was stressed. But now when I think, and I begin to try to take some of the pills, and I have never been so crazy in my life like I was in that time, and that is horrible to do that to people. And now today when
I
we
know,
know so
I
much,
know exactly what you're talking about, Marie. I mean, I've
yeah,
actually pulled Missy and I, my wife, we've actually pulled a couple girls back, or women back, from the same kind of thing. Even their husbands were telling them they were crazy,
yeah,
and sending them to, and they were pumping them so full of drugs. I got a friend. We finally got her away from her husband, the best 300 pounds she ever lost, and she's like brand new today, just getting
yeah.
away from her husband, actually. So, but okay, can we swing this a little bit, because okay, now we've kind of nailed the Magellan's thing, and we've talked about some remedies possible, and ways to work about that. Where is it coming from?
Sorry.
Where, any idea where is it coming from? Where, anybody out there got any idea as to where this Magellan's is coming from? I mean, it just
My,
come out
my,
of nowhere.
I,
Yes,
These
I
are
s-
can help
nano
now.
part.
I
Yeah,
see
I
the
can help.
chemtrails.
There are several ways where you can infect it with this if you want. I mean, the best possibility is how you can get Magellan's is by subdermal experimentation without informed consent, which means that these nanochips, if you want to, because it's in fact a technology that auto-assembles, self-assembles and auto-replicates within your body, is brought in your body with a syringe, basically, by an injection, by a shot that you receive. So this is one possibility. That means many people have been victimized by this technology, for example, when they underwent a surgery and with a general anesthetic, for example. That is a possibility where somebody would have this kind of access to your body. Then I think Maria already said it. There has been a proven link to the chemtrails. For example, Dr. Hildegard Stenninger, who did extensive research on Magellan's, she compared a chemtrail sample that was sent to her with the material, the samples that she took out of her patient's skin, and could see that the material matched with basically the same material. There's also a link to GMO food. some people say it should not be called Magellan's. Some people say it should be called organisms disease. So there has been a link to GMO food. So there's several ways how you can get infected with it. In my case, but I cannot prove it, I believe that, as Hans and Dirk and Marie also know, is that being very disillusioned at that time with my partner, I registered in a program at the State University Clinic to get inseminated, so that I could basically become a mother, a single mother. And I think I wouldn't have gone through with this, but it was in a period where I was very, very disappointed with my partner. And finally, well, I didn't think I would have really done it. It was more out of personal disappointment. But in that period, I underwent surgery, which involved general anesthetic, and these fibers in this material came out of my skin very shortly after this. And very shortly after this, I got pregnant by my partner. So I believe, although I don't have proof, that I was chosen as a guinea pig at that time, or that I even put myself on the map for them as a very interesting candidate to perform research on, because I'm alone here in Brussels. I'm not from here. I don't have any family here, and I registered myself as being single. I think that at that time I put myself on the map for them for what Dirk has described before, for illegal biomedical research. And because when I had to undergo the surgery and the first symptoms of Magellan's, the first time that this material came out of my body, out of my skin, was very shortly after this. So I have a strong suspicion, although I don't have the actual proof, but I have the strong suspicion that at that time I was victimized by this technology and basically used for guinea pig to perform illegal biomedical research on.
Mm-hmm. What do you suppose, like our immune systems? Like our immune systems are being attacked, right? That's what's really being broke down. We're being injured on that level. They're breaking down our immune system. So, but that doesn't explain Magellan's to me. Still,
no.
I could see us getting all kinds of other ailments, but where did this damn Magellan's come from? Is what my question. Yeah, you think it's coming out of them chemtrails?
No,
or
I think
is this something else? Is it even man-made, or could it be from outer space, or could it be? I don't understand. Or from inside the Earth? Could it be something that came from inside the Earth?
No,
I don't know. It's been created in a laboratory, blast me.
I
and
think.
As I just said,
sorry, can you hear me?
Either by the chemtrail or by a syringe if they're injected into your bloodstream. But it's nothing to do with the.
Well, I heard a guy just recently.
Okay.
I heard a guy just recently say he thinks that was on what sea to sea, coast to coast. He said he thinks he caught it from another guy, so that suggests it's transmutable between humans or from species to species. And I wasn't familiar with that. I thought it was something that was being absorbed.
Besides what the experts say, for example, Dr. Randy Weimer, who's head of the Magellan's Investigation Center at H.A.A.R.P University, and also Dr. Stemminger, who has done extensive research on Magellan's, is that it doesn't seem to be very contagious. It does seem to, they do seem to use, I mean, some studies show that they use something which is called H.A.A.R.P, which is actually a bacterium that allows you to inject certain seeds, plants into that actually are plants from plants or animals into humans. So,
But what I think
I mean, that
is,
can be used for different species. There seems to be some evidence that Agrobacterium is Agrobacterium tumefacius or so it plays a role, but most scientists say that it doesn't seem to be contagious. But it seems to be. It's pretty sure that it has been created in a laboratory. So I don't believe it's done by aliens. I'm pretty sure that it's our own species that's doing that to us. That we are part, like Marie as well, either by some illegal biomedical research experiment, or there has been a proven link to the chemtrails, so you can just inhale this material, these very fine particles, and once they go into your bloodstream, they then gradually start disassembling an auto-replicating process within the human body.
So we're the Borg. That's virtually where we are now, man. They're turning us into the Borg.
Into cyborgs, yeah.
Yep, they're gonna nanoparticle us and then control us.
Yeah, it's transhumanism.
Damn, it makes me want to stop breathing. Some people will accept this nanoparticle, and some people will not. And it's people that don't accept the nanoparticle that are getting sick. Those that are accepting the nanoparticle are obviously like, well, I'm not getting sick, or I don't notice anything yet, but I've had things coming out of my skin for years, and I don't think they're nanoparticles.
No, if they were nanoparticles, you'd know, because they have different colors. You've got very strange thing coming out of your body fibers in different colors: red, blue, pink, all kinds of things, hexagons, seeds, granules. I mean, black and white. Yeah, they look basically like sand seeds, but
but
little
I think
sand cones.
that have
Very
a
strange.
explanation.
And the explanation is that I think that actually this material coming out of our skin is a very healthy reaction of our body. It's a defense mechanism. The body, it comes into your body. It's a real foreign invader. It means something comes into your body that is not recognized by the body. It is not part of the body. So the body, as a defense mechanism, tries to reject this material, tries to push it out. Unfortunately, once it is in your body, it automatically starts this self-assembling and auto-replicating process. So what comes out are actually pieces of this technology that are small enough that the body can push it out. But once it starts to build up these wires, if you want to, it's because it's a complex system of wiring that is starting to build in the human body. It can't be pushed out anymore. So, and that is why also the effect that this material comes out is most of the victims, they're rejecting more material at the beginning of the disease, and later then less material, because then this complex system of wiring is built up, and the self-assembling and auto-replicating process is completed. It's a very, very sophisticated nanotechnology that is certainly 100 years ahead of what we can do at the moment. What is our current technology standard?
My experience is what I have seen when I have done this research on myself. That is, in beginning, when what I think we get something in the beginning. I don't know if I want to say the name Magellans, or if it's from chemtrails or mind control or what, because perhaps something that we could have one name for it, but in different kind of levels, because a lot of people, TIs for example, they have a Magellan's symptoms, and what I have understand now, for example, if I said I have Magellan's, but in that step I am in now, so I have seen for example, the red and blue and like that, it's not growing, it's not coming inside, it's just layer under the skin, so it looks it coming from inside. And when you can draw this out, the or the crystal one, or and there is a lot of stuff I have found. More you come down to your skull, and then I have seen it's go. I think the thing started for me with my cyst in my breast, and that was the first time, 2007 or 6, and now it's interesting because everything lays down to that one, and then from that they goes in the body in different ways, like a spider web. So I think if you knew this from the beginning, if I knew, because I was so close to do what I do today for 5 years ago, and perhaps I could stop a little of it. And example, when my hair when I begin to lose my hair, I didn't lose it. It was like it's crawling under my skin, and it was electricity. It was like
That sounds like that sounds like when I had. It seems similar to like radiation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I had the same thing. My hair hurt.
Hello, nice to meet you. It's the first time we are talking, in fact, right?
No, I never can find my head. I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay.
Right by the mountains.
Lovely place.
I just moved here from Phoenix.
You've started a new coast to coast.
Yeah, I just moved from. I was in California, and that's when they told me I have always been very healthy and vegetarian and real natural lifestyle. I lived in Hawaii many years, and then moved to the San Francisco area. And one day I just wasn't feeling good. I felt like something, well, started in my finger. I had this, like you're saying, like a crystal type thing in my finger, but nobody could find anything in my finger. And I went to the doctor for that, and about a month or two later, I started having back, like I don't know how to explain, like a sciatic nerve type feeling that would shoot down my back into my legs. And so bad that I went to the emergency room, and we have to do surgery on you immediately. You got 3 grapefruit-sized tumors, and we want to. So I was like, what? They're like, you got cancer. I'm like, nobody in my family's ever had cancer. But I got caught up in that whole scare and went through the surgery. And while I was in surgery, they did radiation, and that's then it was like, you're gonna die and blah blah blah. And I started doing the baking soda and molasses, keeping my and it's almost 5 years since that, and I'm here, and I went from California. I left California because there's a lot of chemtrails, and I was picking up a lot of electromagnetic issues, and anything I would touch electronic wouldn't work anymore. I don't know what was going on. Is it working? So I moved from California. It was worse, everything, the chemtrails, I sat a lot on my porch, being outside, trying to be in nature, and just watching the sky, saying, look what they're doing. And nobody believes you, they think you're crazy. It was Julie and my brother, my daughters, they went through it with me. Like, I could have the electronic door opener to the car, and it wouldn't work whenever I touched it. But if they touched it, it would open. So it was only me. Whenever I touched something, it wouldn't work.
That was the same with me.
Yeah.
I had
Anything
my son.
and they're just go, oh, I don't know what's wrong with you. But now I feel a lot better being up here in the mountainside. I'm thinking about moving up to this cabin up in Netherlands, it's called. It's away from electricity, and I just hear too much. If I get around the, electricity, it seems to really bother me.
Yeah, me too. That's the worst. The electricity, lamps and computer, everything. I shake and I have a heart rush and
Yeah, that's EMF.
Yeah,
That's EMFs, and I know Missy. We go to bed at night and we got the ceiling fan in the bedroom, and she likes to have that on at night, and it is nice when on a hot night and stuff to have that air blowing on you. But those EMFs being right over top of you like that all night long, yeah, it doesn't do you much good.
I can't have any lights on or anything. People are like, you're always in the dark, but I just use candles. I just, as natural as possible is best.
That's so hard for many to believe because they always ask me why I can't go, why I'm at home. And I said last week because I have my sons, they are 20 and 25, and they come and visit me. And where I live now, it's a small place, so immediately I start to react it in my body, and I said little joke to them, oh, I'm allergic to you, but what I have begin to understand, it's not it's so little makes my body to react for the dust, and when they have the computer, and even if I have not my computer, if I go out to them, I begin to vibrating in my body and the electricity. Now I have no hair, so I have not that problem. My hair will stand up, but it felt it felt sometimes like my hair with, oh, but I have no one, and so that's so hard to live in a town because I live in a south of Sweden now, and there is a lot of electricity. If you go shopping or whatever you do, it makes me vibrating and give me reaction in the body.
Yeah, I have the same with electricity. I like to go 30 minutes up the mountain, and a little bitty town, not much, going on there, but I feel free and really peaceful. I feel really healthy just being outside, being by the water, being by the trees, away from the power grid. So many people that are bald-headed, they're all walking around.
The ringing ears all the time, but I mean, I've been scanned, and we could measure very clearly that the radio frequency emissions came from my ears, the zone of my ears. So I know there are implants in there. I mean, I can feel them, and I've got these ringing ears, this false tinnitus. 24 hours around the clock. So I know they're implant, they're cochlear implants. So no doctor will admit this, but I know that I have them.
The wires is around because what I have found out is, and I also remember in the beginning when the first began to come, it was like it's going in my ear, even my ears blowing up. And now when I draw them out, I can really, it's like I have some metal signal in my ears when I'm drawing out, and it's very crazy. When I can really take the wire, so it feels like it's wire around my ear and out, and then it's go down to my throat, and this is really crazy because I saw you written about the hair. It's not that I have not hair, and that is because it's a lot of pain with this film over and these wires and these different sounds, and I can hear from far away a specific sounds like ventilation or signals, and like you said, Hans, this bzz, and but then I can not hear so much if there is something in front of me, and that is the same with my eyes. I when I read, I have a very blurry vision, but I can see really shadows and laser like blue lamps, and you know, this special, and it's interesting why you can do this, because it's like we are plastic, and then under we are surrounded by and twisted by these wires that we not can see with your eyes. Because if you look at me, it's like shaving.
I get about it. Okay, so we're so much our mind, right? So much of us are our mind. We can really actually heal ourselves with our mind. Do you think that Magellans can be healed with the mind? I mean, can we use a placebo? Could we just, could we just be told this pill will work and it will fix it? Or, like, why are we not seeing that ability to just use a placebo effect to heal?
Well, I don't think
this sort of thing. Well, some really bad illness. Even cancer can be cured.
That Marie was just talking about from the Magellans Research Group, who's the researcher, and Marie is just currently trying his product, says that he had a friend who was a microbiologist who found apparently a way to dismantle this technology within the body. And the body, the amazing thing, what our body is, will then just, once it is dismantled, just push basically this technology out. He was a microbiologist. He was Dr. Will Spencer's friend from the Magellans Research Group, and he had planned a press conference or an event where he would present his research, and he had apparently found, if you want to see a cure for this, at least a way to dismantle this technology within the human body. The problem is that he died just before, on the weekend, one of these very strange and sudden deaths that is so common between microbiologists these days. So the research could never be presented, and so there is apparently a way. According to Dr. Will Spencer, his friend had found a way, but shortly before being able to present this to the public, his research, he died.
Yeah.
So we must admit that it's that there were certain people who really did not have an interest in finding a solution to the problem.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Can't really say I'm fine because there's always a problem. So mine is be alive, basically. So I'm alive. But it's always the same thing. Is vibrating, is noisy. I'm used to the use beat on the floor, and I'm trying to use a camera that has these cameras about 30 gigabytes, so I can let the camera open for about 6-8 hours. So because of that, I noticed that they stopped to bite it in the wall because I can record it. At least I'm safe about this problem, but they use something else because I don't know what is it. This vibration is really annoying because I can't study. So now I'm sitting in my chair and I feel in the chair my body vibrating. I don't know what the hell is it. It's really, really uncomfortable. It, there is no, it's, I don't know, it become normal. I don't know if I have to repeat always the same thing, no, because I think if you are TI, you know what happened. Every time you go out, there is always this theater of the door. Sometimes I start to laugh about that because I know that it's going to do something. So I need to be prepared about it. So, for example, well, I think I went with the bikes by the water, by the river, where I live in Liverpool, and I would actually expected something to happen, and actually happened about 2-3 different people on the way that was doing some silly things, just humiliated or do something that can hurt me, I can feel hurt about. So it's every day like that. Sometimes I give up and I'm laughing. Sometimes I go very sad because, of course, you can't have friends because you don't trust. I was actually thinking about in the last couple of weeks that one of the girl I was with for a year and a half, probably she was with me just for destroy my life, not really for any other reason. And I'm thinking, is it that right or not? Because it's really thinking about what a person can do, can transform herself to the point that go to bed with one person, go to and live in the same flat just for one purpose, that is to make the life of one person that as me worse. And I think about how the hell can force or convince one person to go like that. And I really don't understand how. I mean, if someone asks me, can I pay you? Can you just be the boyfriend of these girls, and then you have to tell me what this person does. You have to give me all the information I want. But it's probably a job like that. But I mean, I wouldn't do a job like that even for £400,000. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, how really poor. All these people are forced to do that because probably that is the job to do these people. But I don't know in which context that these people are find themselves to find this kind of action and work just for I don't know what, for destroy another person. And in the last couple of weeks, I really think I don't want to believe to myself that one person can literally stay a year and a half with one person, with me, just because they was looking for something, or because they want to destroy me. I don't know what they want to do. I mean, it's shocking to think about that. I mean, it's just I can't believe in myself, and that's just on my mind every day, and I'm thinking that basically what happens, my mind dissociates from reality, because when I come back to the reality, I think that is really too much, and so sometimes I'm feeling my brain fly away because that I can't handle it. That I can't even believe that someone, a human being, can do that to another person. I mean, I wouldn't harm a cat. Why I would even think about to harm a person? I don't know. I mean, that is.
Can I butt in?
Okay, there's a friend, a German friend I had on Facebook a long time, and we were chatting every day, and he called me also on Skype and everything, and the name is Holger. And you know what happened to Holger? They took him out. It's another victim here, you know. He's not mind controlled, but he knows many secrets what is happening in Germany because he lives there, and he not even had time to tell it to me because he knows that when you write a message, someone else can read it, you know. So we were thinking on a way that he can give me the message directly, maybe writing a letter. Or suddenly a friend of him wrote me an inbox on Facebook, and she told me, guess what, the police caught him and they put him in a mental institution. They put him medication, you know. I mean, he has to take pills and they give him a shot. He's in Germany, I'm in Mexico. I cannot do anything from here, you know. I just can call people or who are now listening. Maybe there are some Germans there that they start to research and checking out how to bring that guy out, and maybe others who are also suffering the same destiny like Holger.
And you know, Hans, this sort of false institutionalization of people in mental institutes, even when they're obviously not, in fact, there's nothing wrong with them mentally, but just for purely political reasons or whatever. I mean, it's happening with now open frequency in the U.S. I mean, I've been reading about several cases of this sort of thing. So it's really it's amazing.
Oh, we got hundreds of scientists that have gone missing or died, or what they're doing to some of these people. Well, look at James Holmes. What happened there? Like, that was something happened. Like, he was a bio what do you call these guys, tech, same as the one that just died.
I was thinking, for instance, about this case of Brandon Robb, the former Marine. Do you know who I'm talking about, Stone?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, same kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, just for political purposes, there was nothing insane about him at all. In fact, they weren't able to produce a diagnosis of him or anything about for that reason. They didn't charge him with any crime or anything. And in fact, they had to release him, but only because I guess he had his mother and relatives, friends, whatever, who were able to contact a lawyer with a human rights organization that in fact became interested in his case and appealed before a judge and was able to get him out of there. And that judge admitted that there was no reason to hold him whatsoever. And there was no reason given by the authorities, and not any legally compelling reason whatsoever. So I'm sure that sort of thing is.
That leads us to this problem. Dirck. All our military is in huge danger. Every single one of our personnel is in huge danger because they can't change. They can't buck the system. If they do, they're going to take it out.
I mean, this fellow had served in the Marines, and then he got out of the service. But at any rate, apparently this sort of false institutionalization is now taking place with some considerable frequency, according to the lawyer that as I said, got him out of there. Just in Virginia alone, where this happened, he said there are 20,000 institutionalizations every year. Now, maybe some of those are, of course, justified, but apparently a lot of them aren't. So I really hope, Hans, that your friend is able to get out, and I'm sorry that happened.
But just it's very sad that your friend has been closed in his institution.
Yes.
Do you know more about that? Which reason?
Yeah, he's been institutionalized.
Hans, I really enjoyed the opportunity of being on your podcast tonight, and I certainly also enjoyed the opportunity to listen to the other participants here. I have to leave now because I'm extremely tired, but I just wanted to say thank you again. So thank you all. Thank you, Hans.
Okay, thank you too, and see you next time again.
Yeah, I would also like to thank you, Hans, and to make this happen. I think it was a great live stream, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on YouTube. And thank you for everything you do and for inviting us tonight. So.
Okay.
Buenas noches and gute Nacht.
Yeah, perfect. Buenas noches, gute Nacht.
Good night.
Okay, see you soon, friends.
Yeah.